It's the weekend rip.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Hope you had a lovely day of giving thanks. Hope you're thankful. I sure am. I'm grateful for this show. I'm grateful for you. It's too late. We're past being grateful.
Yeah,
that was one day last week.
You're saying Happy New Year's on January 25th over here.
Yeah. Cem Karsan is with us again. Oh, grateful for him.
Grateful for Cem.
Forever. How you doing, Cem?
I am as grateful as ever. As ever. This is we here in Chicago. We got like 9 inches of snow over the course of like 5 days. So yeah, it's
a winter
we're really in the depths of winter. So we have to be thankful.
We turned on the air conditioning in the studio here a moment ago because it was hot. LA just folks, we got a great episode today. We're talking about what the heck? Oh, the timer ran out. That's very nice. We're talking about Venezuela, Japan, Bitcoin, Michael Green's essay on the survival line being $140,000 now, the new Fed chair, and I wanted to go into a little bit of Cem's very, very, very solid, incredible interview with Maggie Lake. I listened to that whole episode the other day, watched it rather, and it was highly recommend folks go check that out because we get Cem's whole life story, and it was fascinating and very vulnerable and
not gonna cry today.
Great.
No crying today.
No, well,
no crying at the jam session.
I'm an emotional boy. So you've been talking about this Venezuela thing for a long time, and you've been tweeting about it and showing that we're going to be bringing freedom to Venezuela imminently, and it's looking like any day now, right?
Yeah, precisely on schedule, right?
Yeah.
We said it about almost a month and a half to 2 months ago, and everybody was like, psh, come on now. And here we are. I think it's really any day now. Look, it's not just going into Venezuela and what that means for markets and for like long-term geopolitics, but it's what it means more about the probabilities of what's happening behind the curtain. Right.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, look, it's not a coincidence today that Witkoff and Kushner are at the Kremlin talking. It's, we're in the middle of a big geopolitical chess match. And I would argue it's more than a chess match. It's there's some real kind of allies and pulling, your friend's enemy is your friend stuff going on here, right? And we are, in my opinion, I think it's probably hard to dispute that we are talking to the Russians and making a grand compromise of some kind. And the compromise is, hey, Russia, you're not going to send any troops. You're not going to send any weapons into Venezuela. You're going to remove and stay out of this mess in our side of the hemisphere. We are going to do, expand our sphere of influence or whatever you want to. That's the polite way of saying, do regime change in Venezuela and take control, which is what it's all about, of what's happening there and the resources there. And in return, we will stop doing the proxy war with Ukraine and force Ukraine to relent, or at least not be involved and force the Europeans to get involved, and then the balance of power changes there. That seems very clear. Actually, they're basically saying as much. The real question is there more in this negotiation? How is China involved? Because China's been, again, supporting Venezuela in its own right. And there's a grand negotiation happening over there, as we know, with Taiwan and China. So, again, some people are going to be like, that's a conspiracy. I think half of what I say people think are conspiracy, and then they happen. So I think just be aware that there's a very big geopolitical kind of chess match going on, and a lot of pretty wild in the scope of history, like big realpolitik conversations going on about kind of the game of risk. That is the big powers of the world trying to maintain and control the power that they want and stand up to one another and compete. And I think we're seeing that some big tectonic moves in that department. And why does that matter? Well, it changes some of the calculus for both inflation and increased geopolitical conflict, long-term expectations for who will win and what that means for different outcomes. These are big long-term structural moves.
Yeah.
And so you have to be very thoughtful about what's happening there. So I think, again, we will move in Venezuela quickly. It will happen soon. I think there are big ramifications. No guarantee that it'll be a cakewalk. Probably will. And when that happens, that will be very profitable for certain businesses over the next 10, 20 years, right? Not just in the next week or month. So that's one reason to be aware of it. Two, that'll change the control of oil and OPEC. It will lighten OPEC's control. So it will make our need to be more involved, continually involved in Saudi Arabia, less important. It will also allow us to flex that muscle and manage some of the inflation that we're seeing otherwise through lower oil prices. Mm-hmm. Again, not overnight, but definitely over a multi-year period. And that's important, given that we've talked about stagflation and the populist impulse. And if we're going to do tariffs, that's structurally inflationary. So you need counterweights. You need other things. And that's why the calculus is happening. As much as I have some disagreements about how things are being done and what that means for the long-term kind of rule of law and the things that the U.S. has earned over hundreds of years, right? Which, the exorbitant privilege of the U.S. dollar is probably the most actual kind of embodiment of the power that comes from that. And we're degrading that. So despite my disagreements with the long-term effects of this, from that perspective, from a simple game of transactional risk, like a game of risk, like I alluded to, taking Venezuela is, and this is going to be unpopular, but moving on Venezuela and expanding your sphere of influence, it's the most important piece on the board on this side of the hemisphere. I mean, it's the biggest oil reserves on the planet.
Right.
It's strategically at the southern shore of the Gulf of Mexico. It is, from so many perspectives, when it comes to this side of this hemisphere and controlling, like the Monroe Doctrine, like controlling this sphere of influence on this side of the hemisphere, it is the most strategic asset. And if you're going to take the view, well, we can't defend Ukraine and Russia, we're not willing to. We're not going to defend Taiwan from China, like we can't. It's just not going to happen. And well, instead, if we're turning this into a transactional game, it makes sense, right? Again, that's going to be unpopular in some ways to say those types of things. That's realpolitik. That's the world we unfortunately live in. But I do think there are incredible long-term negative effects of doing this. Is why the U.S. hasn't done something like this, specifically in Venezuela, for a long time, even though it's done other small incremental things under the hood.
What do those look like? What are you worried about?
Look, these are all like bricks in a wall. It doesn't. It's not one thing that leads to a net result. But the increasingly, if we do things openly that are in contradiction to international law, and we do not follow our own laws, at some point people lose trust in the laws and the power, the entity behind those laws, that power. And that is what can swing the balance of power for people from kind of our allies, our sphere of influence, and degrade the power of the United States in the long run. That's the truth. Now, that is not a date next year, 2 years from now, even 4 years from now, 8 years from now problem. But it is something that if we continue to go down that path, which we have kind of step by step for a while now, but this is a step function, And if we're just going to go blatantly and do this, which we are, it does have, it does degrade the power of the U.S. in the long run, in my opinion.
So I take it that you don't believe the line coming from the administration that this is all about stopping the flow of illicit drugs that are killing Americans, which is certainly probably, obviously there's probably some truth to that.
There's zero truth to it because there's no fentanyl that comes from Venezuela. And that is the big issue. It does not come from Venezuela. That is it's like Iraq and weapons of mass destruction. It's kind of taking something people know about, putting them over here to this thing. Yeah. Does some cocaine come via Venezuela? Blah, blah. Sure. Is that the major issue in the U.S.? No, that is not the problem. Never mind. We just pardoned the leader of Honduras, who was a convicted drug trafficker. So we pardoned him while we're going after it's theater.
He was convicted of bringing like hundreds of tons of drugs into the. I mean,
America likes to party, man.
It's theater.
Jim, I know from your interview with Maggie that I learned that you spent a considerable amount of your youth in South America, in and around all over the place, and I'm wondering if you had any kind of insight into why a country with over $14.3 trillion worth of natural resources finds itself in such a weak position. Like, what do you attribute that to explaining it to someone who has little to no understanding of Latin America and Latin American politics?
Yeah, it's not Latin America specifically. There are all kinds of other examples across this. Just look at Africa, right? The resources in Africa are tremendous, and there's a tremendous number of countries who have just exorbitant wealth, natural wealth that is squandered. Why does that happen in general? Well, because corruption. People in power. And by the way, it's not just there are developed countries that experience the same thing. You could argue we're heading in that direction more and more here. Not that we're anywhere close to Venezuela. But increasingly, if you have corruption in a system and people don't care about the people, they will use whatever tools to control the people and then siphon off as much money for themselves and their cronies. And at the end of the day, that becomes a unproductive, economy. So corruption at its core. There's also just quite simply, there's some truth to the, communism, socialism, that stuff doesn't work as well. And if you're in a, as we saw with the USSR, right, there was, it's a system that once you get too far to the left at some point, the natural system, like life is not fair if you operate through that structure. There's some need for some balances in a capital market system to rebalance and make it more fair. But if you go to completely away from capital markets, it just doesn't work. It's suboptimal, and you end up wasting a ton of kind of the potential of an economy often.
Yeah, just speaking of the corruption, we just before this stream we were recording the episode for our podcast, our weekly podcast, and we were touching on, and maybe if we have time we can get to it, some of the David Sachs New York Times article, and in particular, it's just wild that nobody seems to care about how the Trump family and the Trump organization has already profited hundreds of millions of dollars off of their various crypto schemes.
It's billions. It's not hundreds of millions.
At this point, sure. And it's just it's mind-blowing to me that there are still MAGA, not even, I can understand the donors and the influential figures, but just the everyday foot soldiers, the Twitter users who just still are incapable of questioning whether any of this is legitimate or if they even care at this point.
I think we're going to turn this into a Talking Heads jam session again. Same as it ever was. Same as it ever was. Right? The reality is that this is not new. It is not unique to the U.S. The extent and overt nature of it here in the U.S. is relatively new for recent history. and again, I'll get some hate mail saying, all that's the same as, Hillary Clinton and Biden. It's not. It's a step function.
Not close.
Yeah. But there's corruption there too.
Yeah.
Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. system is in entropy, all things entropy. Our founding fathers created a system of checks and balances that was intricate in every way because they knew this, because they were escaping kings and queens. They knew that over time, in order to safeguard this democratic experiment, that they needed to be incredibly intricate in the design and make it incredibly hard to pass laws and change the structure. And they've succeeded, right? Like way beyond their wildest dreams. That said, entropy, things go back to natural state of things. And the natural state of things is life is not fair, and that power begets more power, and that is what corruption is all about. People circumventing laws because they have power and the ability to get more and to be more powerful. It's the law of the jungle. And I think to be like, oh, I can't believe this is happening is so naive.
What can I say, man?
Literally since the beginning of time. We've been lulled into a sense here in the U.S. that this is the way the world. The world is a wonderful place of law and order, and people do good things. Yes, in a system of laws and checks and balances and a guiding light like a constitution, they can, but it takes intricate laws and protections, and the cracks are laid bare in the system. Citizens United, all the gerrymandering, right? That's been brought into the system. Our founding fathers didn't account for everything. And guess what?
Mm-hmm.
Power found its cracks and has passed laws and things to allow money and the influence of corruption to overtake parts of the system. And so it shouldn't be a surprise that now that we're in that state, that there are people trying to take advantage of it in office. It's unfortunate, but it's the law of the jungle, and it shouldn't be a surprise. It's the people's responsibility in a democracy to use and to reinvigorate those structures of government to safeguard for the future and to cover up those holes, to pass constitutional amendments and things. Unfortunately, we need crises to bring people together to fix the problems. And that's why I've said before on this show that, crisis is a good thing, because in the absence of crisis, entropy will continue until maybe we no longer have the right or the power as citizens to counteract and to reinvigorate the economy for not the system of democracy for future generations. So again, this shouldn't be a surprise, but hopefully we'll get a crisis so that we solve these problems.
So you reckon that we're about to see imminently the three big powers, America moving on Venezuela, China moving on Taiwan,
well,
and
the
Russia.
China-Taiwan thing I don't think is imminent. It could be. Now, it depends what you mean by imminent. I just want to
in the next couple of years.
Maybe
Yes.
inevitable.
Next
is
couple
a
of
better
years.
way.
I agree with
Inevitable,
the next
sure.
couple of
Yeah,
years.
it's better.
Yeah, I'm not going to name any sources, but I do have people that are really well connected in China who argue that, again, I have no way to double check this, but they are well connected, that China intended to go this year, that the intention was this year, and that there were inner workings. They had, again, I think it was about 4 months ago, there was a massive purge of the military. I don't know if you read much about it. It was kind of a footnote in China, and there was a bit of a power struggle going on that needed to be dealt with, and that pushed back things this year. But by all accounts, that means it's coming likely next November. And so, but there's no way to know, right?
Sure.
And just in your estimation, I mean, how do you feel that shakes out? Is that just going to look like a kind of realignment for the world, where it's going to be more of a multipolar world in this situation, or is that, or is it more in line with maybe a crisis of a larger global conflict? That
it's a wonderful question, Emil. The reality is, it could go either direction. If it had happened this year, I think it would have been, definitely a polarization, right? I think that's still highly probable. You could argue that this administration sees this, knows this as well, and is making a very hard decision of what do we do? Do we stand up to China and hold the line and, say this is not okay, we're not going to do this? Or, and I think what the thing in Venezuela tells you is that they're probably doing this, say, well, okay, we're not going to go defend this. We're not going to win this. We're not going to, it's your hemisphere, it's your sphere. We are simply going to do the same thing here. The thing nobody's talking about is by going into Venezuela and doing this so overtly, we essentially, regardless of what's going on behind the curtain, we're giving a green light to China. How can their aggression be misjudged, right? How is the world going to judge them poorly if we just did the same thing in Venezuela?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, we're setting up a dangerous precedent. I mean, you were talking about it with international law, but we're opening up the door all over the world for strongmen to move in and
I don't think they're stupid. Like I don't think Trump is stupid. I don't think the administration is stupid. I don't. I think they have made a decision that that's where this is going. Anyway, and I don't agree with it. I don't think this is a preemptive move that where you're taking yourself down from the moral high ground and unable to gather allies to defend this situation that's likely to happen in China and Taiwan. But I think that's what's happening. And so if that's the case, then it becomes a grand compromise. Now, there are big ramifications of that, massive ramifications, because Taiwan is not just yes, the U.S. gets this, in theory, the oil and the security of having control over the southern border of the Gulf of Mexico and all the rare earths and other things that come from that. But, breaking up the first island chain, and so having no longer being in any way contained, China has much bigger vulnerabilities than the U.S. does. Geographically, demographically, they don't have all their own commodities. They have a couple like rare earths, but they have largely they're lacking in energy and oil supply, and a lot of other commodities that the U.S. has incredible wealth in. So I would argue that taking Taiwan is much more important for China than Venezuela is for the U.S. And and so that realignment changes some of the bigger dynamics. Anyway, but this is it does seem that when that happens, it is a big thing, by the way, for all of this happening. We can talk about power struggles, us versus them, U.S. But let's talk about the whole. This is not good for the whole, right? This is not good for supply chains. This is not good for kind of more long-term. If Taiwan becomes Chinese property, right, like controlled by the Chinese, there's a single point of failure which nobody talks about. And by the way, I personally don't think it's a coincidence. Nvidia is the biggest company in the world now. Mm-hmm. Yet 80% plus of its production happens in Taiwan. It's the core center of the AI trade, which is something like 90% of all, or 80% of all returns since 2019. I mean, I did a poll because I just kind of trying to open people's eyes to this. And it's like, how much would Nvidia drop if Taiwan was invaded, taken over by China? What would happen?
50%.
Consensus is 50 to 75% drop. They lose all production for the next several years.
You think that China would shut it off?
Oh, I mean, Taiwan has kill switches on purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would go offline for at least a year or two, and when they turn it back online, it'll be under Chinese control. And the production that's in Arizona that we've been trying to replace, I think is at 4% or 5% of total production, and that's over the last 5 years. That's where we got to. So there's a anyway, and let's just assume it's a 50% decline in Nvidia on that news. What does that mean for the U.S. market when it happens?
Well, then you also got Broadcom, you've got AMD,
the whole
you've got
AI
all
complex
the others.
is basically shut offline.
Yeah.
And never mind the leverage and all the stuff that goes into that. All those investments they implode.
Yeah.
They're already stretched without that issue.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, my friend David Drudge, actually, I think, well, we recently talked about this, but there's a quote which I think I love in terms of risk management. It's not about prediction. It's not about probability. Risk is not about, is this going to happen? Is it not? It's about vulnerability. And nobody really manages risk. Everybody's trying to predict, what should I get out? Should I stay in? Right? That everybody is structurally exposed dramatically, like 60-40 stocks and bonds. We are at record levels of investment in just long-only investments. And there's incredible vulnerability in this. Again, I'm not predicting when or how exactly, right? But there's incredible vulnerability in where we stand, not just in terms of valuations, but in terms of single points of failure.
Speaking of that, just real fast, because again, we were talking about the David Sachs thing. Part of what he facilitated was with Jensen Huang, they convinced the Trump administration through all kinds of God knows what kind of flattery and whatnot, and tit for tat stuff behind the scenes. But they've now convinced the Trump administration to allow Nvidia to sell their chips internationally, including a recent 500,000 chip sale to the UAE and presumably China also. And their logic is, well, if we flood the market with American chips, our domination will only continue to grow. Whereas if we were to shut China off, they might come up with something better on their own. And I just wonder if you agree with that take or have any kind of thoughts on that.
There's no right answer.
Yeah.
I mean, Nvidia has a dramatic head start, like 2, 3, 4 years ahead. And in this world of technology, that is, that's a light year, that is, and, if you think you're going to hand over those chips at the scale you are, and they're not going to be, reverse engineered, used in any, all the good luck, right? Like, I think so there's real cost to doing that. Now, I hear the argument that, if you become the backbone of the structure now, then you could probably gain some level of control over the system itself, right? But I guess a hard one to argue. I think that AI is so important that I think, and this moment in history, like this 10-year period, is, in my opinion, so important that I think I would probably lean towards, again, the previous policies of not sharing that technology.
Yeah. But
there is a larger, grander kind of set of negotiations. And again, these things are not easy. They're big, big questions.
Well, I suppose it's a good spot to transition to Japan and their potential rate hike of a whopping 25 basis points in December, which would strengthen the yen. And people are talking about the carry trade. I haven't seen it in the headlines as much as I did however long ago it was last talked about.
August.
But
yeah,
what can you explain for me again what exactly the carry trade is and what the carry trade, if I may try to articulate it first, it's that yen are so cheap to borrow. The carry trade is you borrow cheap yen, and with that you chase yield elsewhere.
Correct.
Because it's free money that's it?
Yeah, I mean, look, carry trades exists across the market in all kinds of ways. Yen, all kinds of other yield, like Turkish lira, like US dollar at points, right? All these trades are big ones. There's others just like skew in the market, like downside options versus upside options. Like they're both volatility. You can sell one, buy the other, sell stock, and you have a massive carry trade. These things are the way carry trades work is they make money 98% of the time. They're very profitable. They're leverageable. They're scalable.
Damn.
And so everybody does it, but they exist for a structural reason. The reason skew exists in the market is because everybody is long and everybody needs insurance, right? To the downside, not the upside. And so there is a risk premia, a insurance risk premia, because supply and demand is dramatically imbalanced in the world for structural reasons. That creates a long-term, very profitable trade. The problem with all these trades, these carry trades, is because they are one-sided, the risk premium exists for a reason. If people need to get out, it's a one-sided trade. And that means there's a massive tail on that trade. And so that tail exists in the skew in the S&P 500, and we've seen that again and again and again throughout history. It also exists in the yen carry trade because same thing there. You can used to be able to borrow for negative and lend in positive, and there's a massive, you can leverage this FX, 5, 10 times, right? And you can collect a 2% kind of VIG times 10 again and again, and it wins and it wins and it wins. But when it blows up,
nice.
It blows up spectacularly,
Yeah.
And so, yen carry trade is a big driver of flows. So similar to skew and how we talk about vol effects and there's massive flows that people know about since the beginning of time because of the structural phenomenon that come from the carry trade. Yeah. And those are currency effects, right? Because to lock in a carry trade, you need to hedge the currency on each side, right? Because if I'm borrowing in yen and lending in dollars, the only difference is dollar yen, right? The actual currency, right? And so that creates dramatic currency flows. And this was why, by the way, the yen would consistently be a flight to safety, right? When it was the lower currency, kind of counterintuitive. Like all this massive debt, 200 whatever percent, I think it's 250% now, or debt to GDP. But consistently would there'd be a bid to the yen. They would print more and more money. The Fed, the Japanese central bank, would buy more and more of their bonds, and they basically bought all their bonds. Yet the currency kept going up, and that's a function of this carry trade. Now, this interrelates, to be clear, to the geopolitical conversation we're having now. What's changing? Why all of a sudden, after 30 some years, is this whole thing breaking down?
Yeah. Tell us.
And, the reality is the U.S., after World War II, backed essentially Japan and Germany, right? It's not a surprise that Japan and Germany, two of our biggest allies of the world, were entities who lost in World War II. The U.S. has more military bases in Germany and Japan than anywhere else in the world. But they also rebuilt from the ground up those countries, and they were fully within the sphere of influence in the United States and connected to the central bank of the United States in every way. And so Japan is now because of the geopolitical kind of realignment that's happening, is being told that it is not necessarily getting backstopped, right? When we start tearing down allies and alignments and making deals and being transactional, certain important connections break down. And if we're not going to defend Taiwan, what does that say about Japan?
Gotcha. Yeah.
what does that say about, if we're not going to, if Japan's no longer going to buy our debt and we're going to be transactional, we're not going to say, okay, and if we're going to have a trade war against Japan, who's our ally, right? Or in theory, or has been, they're going to stop buying our debt. And when they start buying our debt, we're going to say, well, we're not there for you. Well, okay. What happens to the strong fundamental kind of connections between this carry trade? Well, it starts to become a little bit more dangerous. And so Japan was able to control inflation. Actually, it was in deflation for structural reasons, but it was able to control inflation largely because of the U.S. backstop. And again, some people will argue with that, but that's my view. And I think they're starting to see real inflation for the first time in 35 years, and they're losing control. What people are worried about, and rightfully so, is they're losing control of the long end of the curve, and that can have major ramifications for the world, for the carry trade.
For risk assets. I mean, so a lot of people were saying that some were calling BS, that it was directly correlated to Bitcoin having that pretty substantial drop. Sorry, we've got people on it. Can you hear that?
I heard something, but
yeah, sounded like
sounded like someone might have come.
They're invading the Ben and Emil show.
It came early. Jesus Christ. Anyway, do you agree or disagree that it was related to Bitcoin dropping?
It's not a
DeFi Llama said that there was a $900 million drop in liquidity over the same 48 hours that the Japan decision was floated.
Yeah, definitely were some liquidity issues driven by the carry trade. That's that was definitely part of it. But I think there's a lot more going on in crypto, and it's much more tied to retail liquidity, being on the ropes. So it's in a vulnerable situation, and it's it's having its own issues that are specific to it. So it doesn't take much at this point. It is vulnerable to liquidity shocks. And I actually, going forward, I think that's important to broader market liquidity. I think we've taken one of the biggest core drivers of kind of a positive market impulse, and we've weakened it meaningfully. And I think that's a function of unemployment increasing particularly the younger cohort. That's seen a dramatic increase in unemployment in the 20 to 30 year range. Also 30 to 40 is also increasing. The younger you are, the worse you are doing in terms of unemployment. That's as we're seeing it right now. And I think that's starting to really force a little bit less demand than there was in markets. And you start to see these liquidations now, and people are getting hurt on both sides, and it's really reducing the risk appetite. And that's important because institutions have been underweight and been squeezed by retail, who has been able to push price. But it feels a lot like late 21 in that regard. When these things start to turn, it first starts slowly, and there's some cracks in the in what's happening. But at some point, again, when flows and other things align, then you start to see the bigger effects. But I do think that what we're seeing, it was not just Japanese 10-year bonds. It is a liquidity reduction that helped kind of push gently into something that was already vulnerable.
Interesting. I'm worried that these guys are going to be. I wonder if we should. I wanted to talk.
Speaking about being vulnerable.
I hope not too much of that is coming through. It does feel like the roof is about to cave in, but I think it's okay. I think it's going to be. I think the roof will hold.
I kind of wanted to, with our last bits here, talk a little bit about just personal stuff with the Maggie Lake interview. Don't worry, not too much, but there were some anecdotes from that I really related to, and I think are just valuable life insights.
It is a really great interview, and everyone should go check it out in its entirety because it's great. But
I mean, you talked a lot about just your upbringing and coming from Turkey into Texas and feeling kind of like the odd man out. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but and just how that kind of set you up for being a bit more fearless than you may have otherwise been, taking opportunities, going where life takes you. I really liked, you said the worst thing in life is to get stuck. And just talking a lot about fear and fear of things not working out. And it reminded me of a quote that I found helpful one time. Instead of being, I still try to say it to myself whenever I find myself thinking it of, oh, what if it doesn't work out? What if it does work out?
Right.
Is what I found to be very helpful to think about. And I'm around the same age that you were when you said you were feeling stuck. And I've been feeling that myself of just like, okay, you know, we've got a lot of things going on and things are good, but in many ways it's kind of like reaching cruising altitude, which can lend itself to feeling stuck. And
I think it resonated with a lot of people. I was hoping it would. I was a little nervous to do it, to be that vulnerable and open, but I do know that I'm not the only one who's lived, you know, my specific circumstances are obviously unique, but I think the larger, you know, forces that I've worked my way through are ones that in different ways affects everybody every day. I think, you know, what's the saying, you know, a lot of people most people are living lives of quiet desperation, right? We don't share everything with each other as vulnerably as we should, I think. Life is hard. You know, things are not easy. But in persevering and looking at kind of things from 30,000 feet and not getting too stuck or too wrapped up, and being grateful for what we have and keeping a positive kind of outlook and thinking about the bigger picture. You know, we not only can persevere, but we can transcend. And I think that that's what I've found to be true. I think, you know, nothing to fear but fear itself. Like all those cliche lines are true. If you keep at it and you go through the gauntlet and you keep picking yourself up, at some point, good things happen. And eventually you find yourself where you belong.
yes, the magnetism you spoke of.
Yeah. And I think that's just so true. It's been true for my life. Doesn't mean it's always going to be easy. Doesn't mean it's all, you know, rainbows and unicorns. But it is, you know, in its entirety, an incredibly beautiful experience, and both in its pain and its kind of glorious transcendent moments. So I think, hopefully people go listen. I think there's something in there for everybody, you know, and hopefully it's very helpful for particularly those people who are stuck or who are afraid, who feel kind of like they can't do it anymore. And
one thing that I struggle with is comparing and despairing, like seeing what other people, perceived peers, are doing and feeling like they're way further than I either was at that age or should be at this age. Feeling like I haven't accomplished enough, whether it be like, especially in trading, like, oh, holy shit, if I had just done this, this, and this, I'd be worth so many millions of dollars. And then only then would I be free to transcend and be transcendent and to have everything that my heart desires.
To be clear, like financial success and freedom is important, but there's a lot of academic research on this. That's not happiness.
Of course,
you know, up to some point, getting some financial freedom so you have less stresses is real and is important. Mm-hmm. But that number is way lower than most people think.
Right.
And well documented, at some point that actually goes down. Like the more money you have, the less happy you are, because then you have nothing to aspire to, and it creates you know, all kinds of other problems among your family and your kids and your society and all kinds of other issues. So, I'll tell you what, most wealthy people, and I know quite a few, aren't necessarily the happiest people on the planet. Now, they're more likely to be not like to be free of some of the constraints and the stresses, but it doesn't mean they're more fulfilled or happier. And so I think it's so important to remember it's not the financial part. Like, again, I think that some of, like, for me personally, being able to be on this show, to be on other spheres where I get to teach and communicate and have some impact is incredibly fulfilling. It's incredibly that not fame, but like the joy of being able to know that I'm on this planet and making some type of impact or difference. That's, wow, what a wonderful thing. I mean, what more could I ask for? It's not. I think you just need to think about the bigger picture. I think in getting there, that's one of the things. In getting to that point, you begin to realize that that's not what's important. And the more you can have that early on and know that, okay, don't get too preoccupied about, am I making more money? Am I not? Am I the president or the vice president or the treasurer, or am I, just a pawn in all this? Like, that's not the point. The point is, what do you need to be fulfilled? What is important to you? And being true to yourself and not listening to what the world tells you is important. I think we're hardwired, unfortunately, to compare. Our frontal cortex is what makes us unique from animals, and that's the same thing we've talked about that drives fairness and justice and these things that are not fair. But it also drives this comparative, keeping up with the Joneses. And I just
and it is the thief of joy.
Yeah, I think the more you get wrapped in that, the more you realize that that's not what really drives joy and happiness and fulfillment in life.
And like you said, with the money thing and the wealthier people, sure, they may not have money or whatever else that is associated with it as a concern, but what that does do is lay bare all the other problems that may have been masked by career pursuits and monetary issues. Now that's all that you look at someone like Elon Musk, who's clearly a miserable prick.
It's obviously unfortunate that the world is run by these miserable people who are looking to fill some kind of thing. But yeah, the conversation is long, and it's clear you've lived a big full life, and I definitely found the most compelling parts. It's nice to hear about your career, but your kind of interpersonal struggles. Your thoughts on friendship and love and parenthood and all that kind of stuff. I think it is clear. Those are the things that life is all about. You know what I mean? It's not about, chasing every last dollar and opportunity.
It is for me. Chasing every last dollar is all that matters. No.
Well, it was interesting. You opened with like, how do I get rid? I'm looking at all these other people, and I'm
talking about also in the sphere of entertainment.
Maybe Ben would be happy if he just knew he had more than his peers.
No, I remember. Well, Jim. So I remember when I first made a significant chunk of money in my late 20s. I was just awash with anxiety and depression because I was like, oh, I thought that this would make me happy and feel free, and I felt anything but. I felt terrified because I was like, oh, this isn't what I've wanted at all. What do I really want? Oh, shit. Now I've got a much bigger issue that I need to get to the bottom of. And
totally.
Oh, man, I'm in trouble. And
I can relate to that. That definitely. Yeah. And I think that's part of how I ended up here, right? I'm a bit older than you are and been through those things. And wisdom is a thing. And it's not linear. It's like, I think I've expressed this before, but people think it's like, oh, you have more knowledge, so you become wise. No, you have all these different things that you learn, and at some point they start all melding, and you get a 360 on the whole picture. And there's a peace and a joy that comes from that over time. And I think, anyway, not to present myself as incredibly wise. I'm still young and learning and making all kinds of mistakes every day. But yeah, a lot of it comes with time and experience, and the more of it you have, that's another thing. I think I am a collector of experiences. I've said, right? Like, I think that's one thing I did early, which I'm really proud of. I haven't been as afraid to jump or to do different things and to have different experiences. And through that process, I've learned a lot, and I've had these incredible things I can refer to that now connect in all kinds of amazing ways. So I do encourage people to do that too while they're young and not get, like I said, stuck or be willing to to jump, because the worst thing that can happen is you fail. And even in that circumstance, you learn and you become more wise and grow. And the worst thing you can do is not fail for 50, 60 years, candidly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good place to
leave
wrap it up. Wow, just in time as they start to fucking drill. Well, I would ask for your predictions going into next year, because this might be the last time we talk to you
I predict
the year
the
of our
sky,
Lord, but
the roof will cave in.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. All right, Jim, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure talking to you. And
Likewise,
if we don't talk to you before Christmas, have a very lovely Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And thank you for everything.
Grateful
Thanks,
for you
Jim.
guys. Take care.
Grateful for you
Merry
too,
Christmas.
buddy.
Have a Happy New Year. Be well.
All right.
Happy holidays.
So long.